All right, we are recording. I'm in Seattle, Washington, and Perpetua Neo is in Singapore. We come to you by two way different places and time zones, etc. But I'm excited for the topic, as I know you are. So we're going to talk about being authentic and what that means, kind of expanding the scope of it. So what intrigued you about this topic that we chose to land on this time?
I think there's so much around authenticity that people always talk about, and there's a lot of fears wrapped around it. Like, for instance, if I do this, am I authentic? What does it mean to be authentic? Does it mean expressing all my feelings, even if I'm pissed off? Or does it mean just, some people have this big fear that to be authentic and to express their boundaries makes them like somebody who is expressing a tantrum. So, it's almost like it's not tempered with grace or respect. So sometimes there's a lot of misconceptions wrapped around it. But at the same time, I think it's something that is important to aspire towards. And hence, that was totally what got me attracted to this topic today.
Well, I know for me in the work that I do that authentic has a connotation of, like where you are in your body.
Mm.
Know thyself, as the saying goes. Yeah. And I think there's a connection, certainly, between, your body and what you feel, and knowing your mind as well. But I think we're going to land more on the body here, possibly, and how that has a ripple effect into the rest of your life, and being able to realize your potential and, speaking up for your voice or making decisions that are in alignment with who you are, the you at the most broadest scale possible.
Absolutely. So where shall we start in terms of listening to your body?
Well, listening to the body is, I think, interesting because I have thought of it as a real simple example, of being, if you were in Singapore right now where it's extremely hot and you were wearing a down jacket that normally you would wear in the winter, you would go outside from hopefully your air-conditioned place, and you'd go outside and you'd take it off. And the reason that you would take it off is because you were hot. Well, how did you know it was hot?
Yeah.
Well, you made a decision, you made a mental decision based on how your body felt. Your body feels hot, it feels uncomfortable, doesn't feel good. And we all, I think, aspire most of the time to feel better or to feel good, so we take the jacket off. So the body is a wonderful, excuse the pun in this particular case, a barometer. And the same thing happens around Thanksgiving, when we eat the third helping and somebody passes the mashed potatoes one more time, or the pecan pie, which I would certainly go for another round of that. And we say, no, that's I'm good, I'm fine, I'm stuffed.
Yeah.
Well, what's stuffed? And once again, it is a feeling that your body is indicating to you, in this case, a fairly, loud resonating sound that, this doesn't feel good. If I eat any more, it will feel more uncomfortable. So I think that's another, on a more gross scale, the down jacket and the overeating is just paying attention to your body, and then you make a decision based on it.
Like, I think there's a lot of different things in our lives, interactions, experiences that are basically just intel. For instance, like when you interact with a certain person, as the relationship starts to build up, you take different experience of this person as intel on whether you still want to be friends or acquaintances with somebody. So in the same way, whatever your body is telling you is very important intel that should not be discounted. And I say this from experience because, I don't know, do you watch The Big Bang Theory?
I have not.
Okay, so in The Big Bang Theory, there's this character called Sheldon Cooper, and he can be quite over intellectual, put it this way. And there's this episode in the Big Bang Theory where he says, me and my body work best by having a very disconnected relationship. And I really laughed so hard when I first watched that episode, because that was exactly what it was like for me when I was younger. You know, I had this really good way of stuffing my body down and my own feelings down and just being very over intellectual. It's kind of like taking mind over matter to the extremes. And so, you know, when you talk about, say, stuffing yourself, when I was a kid, I would stuff myself a lot because I would just tell myself, yeah, willpower, let me just do more and more and more. And actually, that's very, very dangerous when we move it into different realms, like even relationships, for instance. Because when I talk to a lot of my clients, and myself included, when we meet somebody initially whom in hindsight, 6 months down the road or 12 months down the road, we go like, oh my God, I had this really, really bad feeling in my gut, right? And we didn't honor it. That's because we don't honor our body, or we don't know that our body is actually the best source of information for us.
Exactly, exactly. So when you talk to the folks that you work with and you go down the path of paying attention to your body, just take this example of being with somebody that may not be the best fit for you, whatever level that is, partner, friendship. What are the other cues that you talk about or questions that you ask someone about how they're feeling relative to the person they're being with at the moment?
Well, often there tends to be a pattern, because if you talk to anybody, we've all met somebody who's at least quite toxic. We've met at least 5 people in our lives who are quite toxic, right? And there is always this trend that goes on. So I'll ask, okay, so for instance, with this last person, how does this person make you feel? Where does that live in your body? Okay, and we all, some of us is in our gut, but some of us is in our throat, whatever. And I will ask them, okay, if you were to give it a color, what color would that be? I will take them down this hypnosis, and we will go back in time, and we'll realize that the different people who made them feel the same way all activate this feeling in their body in the same place, very strangely enough, or not strangely enough, it's just the body's wisdom. And so in future, what we do is, when you meet a new person, okay, and you know, it could be somebody you're passing by in the supermarket that you may never ever talk to, but check in with your body. If your body feels that same alarm bells again, you know, maybe that yellow feeling in the pit of your stomach, then it's time to honor that, rather than to say that, oh no, you're being mean, you're being horrible, you're not being a kind or nice person, but rather checking in with who you are, because this is your simplest and most elegant way of getting information or receiving wisdom, rather than having to sit down on a couch in a psychotherapist's office 12 months later and having to psychoanalyze for 12 months, you know. You actually get that bit of information straight away. And I think that that is efficient, beautiful, and elegant.
Do you find that a great deal of people who do not honor or are not in touch with how they feel, once they start doing it, feel that it's rude, or that it's inappropriate, or somehow that their reaction to what they feel is shouldn't be honored in some way because of I'm a nice person. Somebody says, well, I'm a nice person, I do this, or I try to be fun and happy around all people, and I try to make other people feel good. Do you find that happens a great deal?
Oh, absolutely. And so we come to this people pleasing thing, which actually makes somebody inauthentic, because you cannot please everyone. Not everybody will like you. Sometimes it's just bad feet, right? In terms of personality. Sometimes it's just bad timing, bad situation. One of you is in a bad place in your life, unfortunately. Okay, and sometimes one of these people are just really, really bad, toxic people. So I think it comes down to the first principle that not everybody is going to fit with you, and that is okay. It's not a moral failing. Sure, you can use some things as information, as intel, like, okay, how can I improve in terms of my social interactions? Yes, that's a valid point. Or how can I be a lot more discerning about who I want to interact with at first? You know, that's also, the onus is also on us. Sometimes we just flip it onto the fact that we are bad people, but sometimes it's so, how can we be truer to ourselves? And then the other thing is to tell ourselves that we actually have the right to have boundaries. Because most of us think that if I have this no in my life, it makes me a bad person. It makes me finicky. And especially, we're talking about, say, people who are exploring spirituality. And this is a time when they are actually pretty vulnerable because they're in a space where they're telling themselves, I need to be kind, I need to be open, I need to be giving. And this makes them pretty permeable towards any different kinds of influence. So this is a time in which actually you need to actually be very aware of who you are, check into your body, and be aware of all the hell no's in your life. Otherwise, you're going to get screwed around with.
Yes, and the same thing from the folks that I get to work with not being in their bodies initially, many of them, is that by honoring it, what they feel, that they, in many cases, that they're tired or that they're stressed out, that sometimes initially it's quite challenging because they think of it as being a character flaw, that there's something wrong with them, that they're not strong enough to be able to push through it, and that they have in their mind, I'm a strong person, and because I'm a strong person, I don't take time off and I don't rest, and if I do nothing, I consider myself being unproductive. And so that so much gets in the way of this being authentic to oneself, as being true and being honoring, like that's how I feel. And I think the wonderful thing is once they start getting in touch with their body, and at the same time start to believe or get past the old conditioning, the old thoughts that I'm less than if I back off, if I don't have a hard workout, if I don't work 18 hours versus cutting it short and going to bed early, that there is something wrong with me. And I think that that's one of the great things that I enjoy doing and helping people around, is getting connected to it's okay, and these are the choices you then have to go forward once you establish how you do feel.
Absolutely. Speaking of this and connecting this to me and my body having a disconnected relationship when I was younger, I remember how there was this time, for instance, when I felt sick, and then I had to stop myself and say, oh, okay, what's my excuse for falling sick this time? Oh, then I thought, oh yeah, okay, my good friend just passed away from cancer. And I was like, okay, so that's an excuse I can make. And then I stopped myself, like, hang on for a minute, what the hell am I saying? What do I mean by that as an excuse? It's like just different layers of moral failings that I was basically layering on myself. And sometimes it's very easy to forget what's going on in our context because we take this mind over body to extremes. Yes, mindset's important, willpower is important, but you got to be able to recharge your mind as well, and your body supports your mind. You don't feed your body, no amount of good stuff is going to go into your brain and your mind, your consciousness. So it's very, very important to allow yourself to rest. Like you said, shutting off isn't a bad thing. Powering down can actually be one of the best things that you can do for yourself. And sometimes it's a lesson that we learn the hard way because it's precisely what we were not taught in school.
Yes, and it's not taught in athletics at a very early age. Matter of fact, we're kind of going through an epidemic here in the U.S. I don't know about the rest of the world, with young kids who are being encouraged to play sports almost on a year-round basis, and the number of injuries that are happening physically, but also mentally long-term, are on the rise because of that. And the culture really values a strong work ethic. Yeah. And I think that one of the things that's I'll start with a quote first. Apollo Ono is a friend of mine, and Apollo won 8 medals in speed skating in the Olympics. He's now been retired for at least 6 years or so. And one of the things he told me in a conversation we had was that you can only train as hard as you can recover.
Wow.
And yeah, it is. And I think that in my being able to, view high-level athletes up close and in person, and high-level achievers,
Mhm.
people who have been successful in business and making money and other aspects of their life, um, sometimes don't get to that point. And if you're in athletics, you to get to the highest level possible, you have to have that day of reckoning where you are infallible, you are human, you are mortal, and that you've learned how to push, and you've learned how to, use your willpower. That's a really important tool. This term called grit,
Yeah.
that you apply it and you can push your body no matter how it feels beyond expectations, and your body may be screaming at you, hey, I'm tired of stopping. No, we're going to go beyond, we're going to run farther, we're going to lift more. And that is a really important first step, I think, to achievement in anything you do. But in athletics, if you don't get to that next level, and I don't think it's talked about enough, so I'm glad we're having this conversation, you will fall to the wayside. There were many, many athletes I watched up close and afar who had the potential, had the ability, but couldn't grip and grasp the idea that, this combination of rest and work was the
Yeah.
key to, that was the plus sign
Mhm.
that got them to the higher level.
Yeah. Otherwise, we just burn out.
And there's a lot of that going on right now. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I'll share. Just recently, I had a client that was really insightful in thinking about being a CEO and being successful and leading a brand new company, which is turning out to be quite successful thus far, and saying, I've learned to push really hard, and I've learned, as I view it, to have this kind of narrow range in which I, achieve. And by paying attention to my body and starting to honor how it feels, and resting and putting what I call wedges in during the day of taking breaks, has really, he said, really given me another tool to kind of increase my ability. I feel like, he said, he felt like he had now climbed up to another, he called it the Jedi level. It was very lovely of him to express it that way. But he said, I feel like I'm learning Jedi techniques, so I can still do a good job and even better. But the cost on me is less than it was in the past.
I love that. I mean, I think essentially that's basically what I call spending time to buy back more time. Because most of us think that we cannot stop. If we stop, there's going to be no time left. So we just run on empty or run on low power mode. And then in the end, in terms of efficiency and output gets much lower. And if we can actually just pause, for instance, just to take those 3 breaths, like I tell my clients, if you have time to go to the bathroom, you have time to take 3 breaths. That is the simplest thing ever, right? I can't make it any simpler for you. And so, like when you can actually do that, you actually buy back a lot more time. You buy back focus, you buy back groundedness, and you just buy back your sanity.
That is so right on, and in athletics, and in the business world as well. That being able to, I use a phrase that is not original to me, but it was what a teacher had said to me, is coming back to yourself. And it was like, to me, it's like a rebooting, and that afterwards, after the 3 breaths you just mentioned, or sometimes I recommend people just go outside and walk around the block and come back into work. That little wedge and time out is amazingly powerful at giving you back, as you were just saying. So that's a great technique.
Yeah, I mean, like all my clients, they speak in the language of money, right? So spend time, buy time. So that's how we make it really, really simple. And then, one of my clients, one of my newest clients, I'm really, really proud of. He was telling me how he keeps thinking that the world's going to end if he takes a break, and then what he realized was, I love to run, he tells me. I've not run for 2 years because I'm running so many different companies. Just say we're talking like 20 companies, right? And then he
Wow.
realized that he takes a run. It says, oh, the world hasn't ended. I actually feel better. And I'm
It,
like, great. Sometimes you've got to take yourself out of that situation. In psychology, we call it a behavioral experiment and only a behavioral experiment can actually prove these old stories we tell ourselves wrong. And then now he's going running, even if it's just once a week, he's proud of it. He feels good. And I feel happy for him.
and those are wonderful incremental gains that, end up kind of building on one on another over the course of time, and realizing that one, you in athletics, you didn't get out of shape by taking a break, and that was a common theme. If I don't work out every single day, I'm going to get out of shape.
Yeah.
Or this, in your case, this person, something's going to fall through the cracks, and one of his companies is going to go belly up.
Yeah.
And there's so much relief when that is dissolved, or in the process of being dissolved, that the thought that is that something negative is going to happen, as opposed to the flip of something very positive is going to happen because of that.
Yeah.
Do you have other
Yeah.
techniques that you work that you impart and teach with the folks that you work with?
Techniques in terms of?
Techniques in terms of getting in touch with the old thoughts of conditioning, or how a certain way of thinking is getting in the way of productivity as opposed to helping.
Well, I think that in terms of, say, the topic of authenticity, which we're touching on today, and there's a lot of fear around the flip to the opposite side. So for instance, if I take a break, I'm going to become lazy. I'm going to lose my edge. Or as we talked about in the earlier video that we shot together, if I meditate, I'm going to go soft, right? Or, but actually a lot of these things takes time to happen. You didn't become so highly strung overnight. That took a lot of time to happen. So you're not just going to become lazy. And actually, giving yourself time out to be lazy, or in terms of sabbaticals, she shows us a lot of things. It shows us that we can still do things, we can still be productive. The world is not going to end. And actually, in terms of my own experience, there have been times when I just pushed my boundaries on the envelope of laziness, in which I just gave myself very little hours of work a week, and I just gave myself a lot of time out just to integrate what I'm doing and to just check in with who I am and reflect. Or and like what they call a little retreat of the soul. It's kind of like in Taoism, they going up to the mountains and meditating. I didn't do that, but I had my own version of that, or tiny little bits of that. And what I realized was actually life will find a way. I'm not saying in terms of eking it out and struggling survival mode. Life actually does find a way. And I realized that there's a lot more support if I give myself that sense of support. And if I want to go protract that further in terms of being authentic and just feel the flip to the opposite, we often have a lot of internal tussles about what kind of people we want to be. So for instance, so I know a lot of people who say things like, oh, if I'm strategic in the way I talk to somebody in a business context, I am being inauthentic and being sneaky. If I sound too smooth by having an elevator pitch when I meet somebody, I am sneaky or smooth or strange. Or if I know the rules of the game, that makes me a bad person. And really, just having an elevator pitch doesn't just immediately flip you to being evil or conniving or or narcissistic. I think that takes a lot more to happen. And so I think before we actually feel that flip happening, we have to stop and ask ourselves, why do we actually think the worst? Why are we jumping straight into apocalypse?
Catastrophic thinking, yes, that is absolutely. I mean, for years, I remember it wasn't until kind of after the fact, but I remember how much I lived in this FOMO, fear of missing out. And I've heard the phrase. I didn't know the phrase when I was experiencing it. Only later that I hear it. But I heard it, and I said, "My God, I've lived a great deal of my life thinking that if I didn't go and go see this and go experience that and go to this event, that I was somehow going to miss out. And that got in the way. It got in the way of the energy, of more of a positive energy flow. I was kind of at a deficit more often than not. And it was through the work of a great, probably the greatest teacher and mentor I ever had, starting to kind of unwind that fear that something bad was going to happen if I wasn't, going and experiencing everything that there was to experience in life, which is impossible to begin with. And what a relief. I mean, my personal experience was, my gosh, one, I'm not missing out on anything. I'm experiencing what I need to experience right now, and I have a choice. Yeah. And what a relief that was, not to have that over my head so much. And I thank that teacher, every day for the ability to discern that was a wild screw that was in me that was tightening down and making my life harder than it needed to be.
Absolutely. I think that on the flip side of FOMO, there's JOMO, the joy of missing out. And have you heard of it?
No.
So that's basically the opposite. Instead of having this big fear, you celebrate the joy of missing out on stuff. And as an introvert, I can tell you that was a big relief to learn about that, to know that I'm normal. So for instance, while I'm quite happy telling people, what, like, I'm going to stay in, I'm not going for this party, I'm not going to stand in the middle of this really, really crowded zone and just feel myself get depleted away, because actually this day in my weekend is actually cornered off for me to recharge and feel good. I've got a lot of things I want to do, and I want to do it on my own or just do it one-to-one with people who matter. But at the same time, there was this fear in the back of my mind that, am I being a spoilsport? Am I being a bad person? Or why can't I just be normal, like all the other extroverts in my life? Until I realized that it's actually normal to recharge on my own as an introvert, and it's okay. And then I learned about JOMO, joy of missing out, and I started to celebrate that. So, it's all about giving yourself permission that this is how I'm wired. It's not like I am being a hermit or I'm being a mean person, but I have to honor myself. It's just like I'm not going to force an extrovert to just sit down on the sofa and do nothing.
Yes, and that if you have a tendency to be a driver and an achiever, and I think I brought this up in our last conversation, that that isn't all of a sudden going to go away. We have tendencies in life and personalities, and I'm similar to that. So my internal drive to do better and to achieve and whatnot will never go away in this lifetime. I think what's happened is it's been tempered. And I love so much, especially when I get to work with some young athletes and young non-athletes, I should say as well, what I would call life athletes, which is my brand, that you're an athlete of life. And in that, the ability to start knowing that there's a choice on a day-to-day basis between, that tendency in my case and most of the other people who I get to work with, of charging ahead and going after it and being busy and achieving and working really, really hard. And then knowing that to what you were saying, earlier, that the opposite of knowing that time out, that less, that couch time, that period of rest is the recovery that actually will assist in more energy, which is a thing that I think a lot of people would love to have more of, and they make choices around that, and they have more energy. And if you have more energy, you feel better. If you have less energy, you don't feel as good. So knowing that the couch may be just the antidote and the medicine to get you back into a higher level of energy, and then gosh, so many things you can do with more energy than less.
Yeah, it means you just have to honor it without having to just judge it all the time. And I think that we often judge our choices just because somebody else is doing differently, or just because somebody says we have to do something else. I think we often do not honor the way we're wired. So for instance, for our high achievers, for our type A kind of people, we have this insane drive to achieve with big ambitions, right? And at the same time, there's always people telling us, oh, just let go, just be easy, blah, 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 and just shut off your brain for 2 hours or 2 weeks. But that's never going to happen. So we have to honor, to find a way to honor who we are and to rejuvenate and be authentic in a way that is in sync with how we are wired, rather than to what I call have a personality transplant or be possessed by an alien. This is all really,
Yes.
you know what,
Yes.
like, let's face it, right? Let's get real. Unless you one day decide to, you and I are never going to meditate for 2 hours a day, or even 1 hour a day. Maybe half an hour is pushing it. Or let's get real. You and I are not just going to sit down and do nothing forever, or tell ourselves to chill or just forget about things. We're not wired that way. So why pretend? I think that's futile. That makes it worse.
Yeah. And for me, the kind of the first little taste that I had about the idea that doing less was actually more for me as an athlete was my coach at the University of Oregon, who was the inventor of the Nike shoe. And there were times when we would go out and at a practice, and he would have me take an easy throw.
Mm-hmm.
And he defined what easy was in terms of the technique. And then we would do a medium throw and a hard. And the hard was never all out. It was never maximum. It was hard relative to the easy and the medium. But, and I talked about this in my book. I said, this was a revelation. This was like, how could easy be useful? How could easy be anything less than kind of a waste of time and a waste of energy? Because, you know, in my mind, the only way to get there, meaning the next level up, was, you know, it had to be hard. I had to be efforting. I had to be tired at the end. And that was the first kind of little tiny kind of implant into my brain that it was possible. And I was more successful because of it. And then it built. I certainly lost it a few times, but you know, the spiral of growth, as my teacher used to say, you know, continues. But that was a real kind of a hard pill to swallow. And then all of a sudden, you started to see results. And my gosh, this is really powerful. That you can do something with ease, not as intensely, not as long. Whether it be work or running or, you know, lifting weights or anything, and there's value to it.
I think speaking of what you say is really powerful, and it really reminds me of trusting in our foundations. Because in order to do something so easy for you, right, you have to have gone through a lot of practice, a lot of training. Like round one, in which you're saying you have to push yourself to see where your willpower can take you. And that easy thing didn't just come about overnight. And often we forget about the foundations we've built and how much effort we've put in to make something seem effortless to somebody else. It's like, for instance, my tailor, he has this sign there. He says that what you're paying me to do in 15 minutes is actually what I spend 15 years to master.
Yeah. Yeah. You can watch the old videos of Michael Jordan, you know, playing basketball, and some of the still images that are out there. You could Google them, and it just looks as though there was no effort at all, and in the movement or the playing that he did. And you know, that took decades to master. And he had an inherent talent, and that he built on. But I think that the people who, you know, aspire to that have to know that, you know, he did that in little bite-sized chunks over the course of a lot of time, and he had some downtime too. He had to have, because it just just doesn't work. You can't play year-round hard every single day. So those are great examples of life, I think, and that it is possible and that it really does work.
Totally. And I think that often we don't have permission to do that, or we don't feel like it's culturally validated to do that. It's like,
No, it's very much so. I agree with you.
and I think changing the conversation and the consciousness on that is so important, which is why this conversation is so enlightening. Just talking to you about this.
Exactly, and giving people the idea that there's a permission that they can grant themselves. As I say, people who start to become aware of their body, honoring it, knowing where their energy is, knowing if there's pain or discomfort, it can then become their own best coach. If I'm coaching somebody, I'm going to ask them a ton of questions to extract data, and from that data, then I can suggest or point someone in a direction to maximize their potential or their energy or their result. And as people get more practiced in this over the course of, doesn't take very long, but it has to be remembered occasionally to just simply be aware of the body. And you ask it a question. You ask yourself basically a question, what's my energy today? Well, it's a 5 out of 10. Well, what would you like to be? Are you satisfied with a 5, or would you like to be a 10? And then the next question is, what would you need to do to be a 10? And maybe it's time to eat, or it's time to go get some exercise, because movement would be a good thing to pop up your energy. So it's so wonderful to see people be able to take on their own ability to, coach themselves to, whatever their potential is, however they define it in their life.
I absolutely agree in terms of the importance of knowing thyself, whether it's in terms of your body or just being human, So I'd like to touch on this tussle that a lot of my clients have in terms of having multiple emotions, or what I call multiple personalities. And they feel like it's making them extremely inauthentic. And I think part of the problem comes down to how, again, we're not taught in school that to be human is to have a lot of different emotions. So, it could be in a context or towards a certain person, you could basically have a lot of contradicting feelings about the same. And it's okay. It doesn't make you inauthentic. Actually, allowing yourself to acknowledge that you have this cocktail of emotions is what makes you authentic, because you're able to understand that there's a tussle within you, or there are these competing different emotions, and that's what actually gives you information about what you're going to do next. For instance, I am irritated at this person, but I also care about this person. So if I care about this person a lot and my irritation is actually less, and our experience has shown us that things actually improve when there's good communications, then it's worth continuing the interaction or the relationship, right? So information in our conflicting emotions are important, whereas a lot of times we kind of expect ourselves to just only have one emotion. I'm supposed to just love this person or hate this person, but it doesn't exist. And being able to understand the human condition is basically what changes things. Or even in terms of multiple personalities. So, like for instance, we all play different roles, right? So, I'm a daughter, I'm a friend, whatever else. And in these different roles, I am a different person. So professionally, I may speak a certain way. And when I am speaking with my brother, I will speak at 3 times the speed and tons more informal. I'll be running across 5 different languages, but that doesn't make me inauthentic. It just makes me somebody who can code switch according to the context. Like whether I'm a professional speaking in a certain tone and having certain boundaries versus very relaxed with my brother or with my friends, doesn't make me, it's just different sides of me. And I think that we all have to be able to step up to the fact that there's different parts of us that exist. It doesn't make us, it is not moral failing. It doesn't make us less of a human. It's just the way it is.
That's being authentic. not pigeonholing yourself into one way of expressing yourself or one way of being around every single person. That's a great, that's a great kind of a vision of being authentic with yourself and with the others that are around you. And I think of it as being very liberating. I think oftentimes the way that I lived, to share a story, was very much metered, very much kind of filtered what I was saying, and to be a certain way and to be a certain person who I thought that I wanted to be. And I really was kind of put myself in a prison. I didn't have many options. I couldn't allow myself to be sad. I couldn't allow myself to be, joyous and laugh from my belly. It was kind of this very constrained way of living life, and it kind of served me well in athletics. But boy, it wasn't so great beyond. It wasn't so great probably in athletics or beyond that. And I think sometimes working with people and that have a desire to kind of escape with permission. That you've landed on a really big word, a potent word of permission to, express themselves and to be however they are, and how liberating that can be once you start to learn how that feels afterwards. It's huge.
Yeah, and speaking of that, in terms of the body constraining who we are, actually starts to have a cost on the body, and then the body starts to erupt. So, for instance, in psychology, we call it psychosomatic. If you run around more spiritual circles, you see Louise Hay's book, You Can Heal Yourself or You Can Heal Your Life. And there's all this, parallels with where a certain emotion is stuck, or where you're feeling angry or blocked, and how that manifests in your body. In Chinese medicine as well, for instance, if you're always breathing, then your heart center is blocked, and so that manifests somewhere in your body. Or if you're angry, it manifests in your kidneys, and then you start to get all these different skin diseases. So I think across different cultures, you actually see that this is a time-honored wisdom. And so I can touch on, say, panic attacks. So what I always, most people don't know what panic attacks are. People think that, just you get panic and you get this overriding sense of anxiety. It can't be that bad because we're all anxious, right? But to actually have a panic attack is to feel like an alien has possessed your body. And it's the worst feeling ever. You never ever want to have it again. And you need to have a panic attack to actually understand what on earth a panic attack really is, But what we have found what I found in my work with my clients is that panic attacks often happen because we shut down how we feel in our bodies, or we constrain many parts of our personalities, or we are unhappy about something in our lives. So we're just shutting down these feelings, or just trying to over intellectualize it away, or do that extreme mind over matter kind of thing, taken to obsessive boundary envelope pushing. And so what happens is eventually the body has to erupt to tell you, stop, listen. And so with all my clients with panic attacks, the first question I always ask them is, what's the first thought that came to your head when your first panic attack happened? And that first thought is often going to echo what the hell is going on in the life and what needs to change.
And after they're spending some time exploring that with you, do they start getting more in touch with their body and their feelings that have been, squashed down, and finding out that things are okay? What happens after that in terms of the recovery, if you will?
But to actually get in touch with their bodies, right? Initially, for them, being able to feel this panic, or for the heart palpitations, or the insane heat at the back of your neck, it's terrifying. But if you give them the science as well behind that, because a lot of my clients love the science, that your body can actually regulate itself. You can do all these things to help yourself. For instance, bringing water onto a hot, stuffy train isn't a moral failing. It's normal human behavior, right? It's just taking care of your body. And when you can actually tune into that, and you actually work on that first thought that pop in your head, for instance, people are laughing at me. So there's something in your life you feel really embarrassed about, or I need to run away. there's something in your life that's really constricting you. Often it's a bad relationship. And when you can actually fix that and get in touch with your body, you actually realize that your body has actually been trying to protect you, but you've been shutting it off. So you actually learn to be your body's ally and to work with it. And what that does is it brings you a lot more wisdom, a lot more productivity, a lot more happiness or peace in different parts of your life. And then you realize that you actually have a lot of gains rather than my body is a scary thing. Because otherwise, like for instance, besides even panic attacks, we think about people who constrain themselves a lot and they cannot express themselves. And what happens? They tend to feel always this block in their throat, or they tend to get a lot of sore throats.
Interesting.
And that's your body just telling you, learn to speak up, learn to honor your voice. And then you're going to have less sore throats.
And that feels better. It feels better to express your voice. One of the great things that I did within the last 2 years, I took voice lessons. Actually, I called it singing lessons. Mm-hmm. And it was the second session I had with this woman who unfortunately moved from the area, and now I miss her dearly. But the second session I had, and this was 2.5 years ago, I was singing and I heard a sound come out of me, and I broke down crying. It was though I had experienced something in me that I had never experienced before, and it was it was emotional, and it was very liberating. I mean, it wasn't it's never fun to cry at the moment, but it's not bad either, and the result was really, really wonderful. And that happened a couple other times over the 2 years that I spent with her. But I love that exploring my voice, and not only from the standpoint that I could sing a song, but simply because I started to feel as though and really bodily feel as though I was expressing myself in a much different way before I met her. And that was very liberating as well. And she was brilliant at being able to, take me down that path and just the right amount each time. But boy, what an experience. I thought I was just going to get singing lessons, and all of a sudden, like, yeah, I'm going to get my voice and I'm going to start, saying things that I want to say. And that
very
did
funny,
happen.
right?
Yeah, it was wonderful.
Speaking of that, I actually had voice lessons maybe about 9 years ago. And there were singing lessons. I specifically signed up for that because I thought, like I moved to Brighton and there's a lot of singers here. I've always wanted to have singing lessons, so let's do it. And for me, that was a very interesting integration of my voice. So I can go really high, like high soprano. I can go super low as well, like deeper.
You have great range. You have great range.
But when it comes to me singing the way, using my normal head voice, this voice, I could not integrate these different voices. So it's almost like disjoint and discordant. And I didn't really know who my voice was or who my voice was. Because if my voice is me, I didn't know who it was. So It was just get it, and I guess when it comes to being younger and not being able to be authentic, that makes a lot of sense, right? So as I did all these lessons, what I realized is that I could learn to integrate it, and I could find my voice, I could create my voice, and then to speak up. So I totally resonate with what you're saying. There's this freedom in being able to create besides express. And it's one of the best feelings because you are at ease in your body. When we cannot speak up, we don't have power.
Exactly. And I think for me, the realization was here, once again, I'm doing something physical. Most of my life has been around physicality. And when I was thinking about, not only lifting weights and throwing a shot put and doing all of the things that were there, and there was some growth certainly that came out of that. Oftentimes I didn't really understand what it was, but once again, I'm back doing something physical, and this physical journey was opening up something in me that I didn't know existed. So being able to access your body and to experiment with it in different ways, whether it's, singing or, learning something new physically can end up, really getting yourself in touch with something else that's going on underneath that's really, really has a potential to liberate down the line.
Absolutely. I think like working with your body, listening to your body, just being kind to your body, it's very important. Like you said, I think in one of our conversations that you're going to have this body for the rest of your life. So you better learn how to enjoy it.
Exactly. There's only, as much as I can discern, we only get one body.
Yeah.
If we get more than one, I have no idea that's true. So as a client a long time ago said, I think the purpose of my body is to carry my head around. And I think that as people can maybe entertain the idea that maybe the body is much more of a wonderful ally that can help with every aspect of your life if you allow yourself to slowly get to know it a little bit better, the signals, the voices of it, and there's a wonderful potential that's within that certainly gives you more choices of how you're going to be in the world today.
Yeah, honoring your body is very, very important. And according to, talking about authenticity is about who you are as a person as well. So for instance, when we talk about taking care of your body, now we'll also talk about even things like skincare. As a woman who is very vain, and that's something I'll totally put my hand and admit, as somebody, so I love clothes. So to me, honoring my body is being able to buy the clothes that I love without judging myself. Because for a long time, even though I know I'm vain, and I could tell you I'm very vain, there'll be this part of me that whispers, maybe that puritanical part that says, you're being a bad person, you're spending money. And it's exhausting. Or, why do you need to take care of your skin? Or why do you need to spend money to take care of your skin? But actually, I do, because this body is going to last me. I want to look good in it. And when I look good, I feel good. I feel luckier. And I swear to you, I attract better luck whenever I take care of myself. So it's, again, when it comes to authenticity, yes, this is who I am. This is how I'm wired. I like being vain. I'm not doing any harm to anyone. So actually, I'm going to take care of my body. That's as simple as that. No apologies anymore.
From winning lots of medals in the Olympics to having vanity and in a wonderful way of taking care of your skin. What a run of a gamut we've covered today. Any final thoughts for today for the folks that are going to listen to this or view it?
I would say that in terms of being authentic, it's about asking yourself, what values do you have? And your body is going to tell you what values you have. And then learning how to walk your talk. So if you can walk your talk, living according to your values, and you can go to bed on most nights with peace in your heart, knowing you can sleep, then I think you're living a pretty damn authentic life. Never mind the judgments that you put on yourself.
Exactly. I agree. Okay, that's a wrap. That was great. Another great conversation with Perpetua on another part of the world. And I am now, and we will come back with another hearty topic, I am sure, in the near future. Until then.